Welcome to the Work Hard, Play Hard podcast. My name is Rob Murgatroyd, and I'm a former doctor turned lifestyle entrepreneur. Each week, I interview some of the best minds on the planet on the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. Come take this journey with me. Excuses are over. It's time to live.
Knowing your why, what's your intention first, because it always has to be greater than yourself. When things are greater than yourself, now there's this bigger, higher power driving the force behind you. And it's no longer about the me, but it becomes about the we. The frequency for me is everything, because if you look at back even in the Bible, right, at the beginning there was the word, right? So that's that sound. That's a frequency that we vibrate or resonate with. The same goes for universe. Educate yourself, every piece of it. When I start something, I want to know everything about it. What are the podcasts? What are the books? What are the successful people? And imitate their success and find your own ways to it.
Okay, before we jump into this interview, I want to invite you to be considered for my 2019 Traveling Mastermind. So go to workhardplayhardmastermind.com and fill out the application, and we'll jump on a call to see if you're a great fit. This year, we'll be in Boston doing lots of cool things like training with Tom Brady's trainer, Alex Guerrero. In the middle of the year, we'll be heading to Monaco doing things like vintage car rides through the French Riviera. And then we're going to wrap the year in Florence, Italy, doing things like truffle hunting and hot air ballooning over Florence. Look, life is all about fulfillment, and I really try and walk the walk. So if you are looking to be part of our tribe of 28 high-achieving entrepreneurs that are in the 6- and 7-figure range, fill out your application at workhardplayhardmastermind.com to be considered. So think of the mastermind as having two parts. The first is the trip itself, and the second part is what goes on over the 4 days within the mastermind. Our group of 28 entrepreneurs will help you brainstorm and accelerate what you want to achieve in 2019. And we'll do that through a variety of different exercises, brainstorming activities, breakout sessions, goal-setting sessions. You know the drill. So go to workhardplayhardmastermind.com, fill out an application, and we'll jump on a call to see if you're a fit. All right, let's jump into today's episode. What's up, everybody? This is Rob Murgatroyd, and welcome to another episode of the Work Hard, Play Hard show. This episode features Pavel Stuchlik. You can find him on Instagram and elsewhere at Noah, AON Official. So I am super excited for you to hear this episode with Pavel, and here's why. My wife ran into him in Atlanta and said, I met this guy on my way to Trader Joe's. He's fascinating. He's an international DJ. He owns a chain of Orange Theories in Hawaii and Atlanta. There's so much with this guy. I was like, how long did you spend with him? She's like, just a couple of minutes. But I'm telling you, you got to have him on the show. And that was like a year and a half ago. We just never have been able to do it with his travel schedule and et cetera. But today we had him on the show, and he's amazing. I Googled him. I did what every creepy husband would do. I checked him out first, and it blew me away at what he has been able to accomplish at such a young age. He has dominated everything that he's done, from professional cycling to owning franchises to DJing around the globe. Like, not like wedding DJing, but like DJing. So when I find somebody like this, I always identify that there are patterns that make them successful. So we dug into those patterns, and we also talked about his private training with Wim Hof, his 10-day silent retreats in the dark. He does a lot of stuff to improve himself. So I think you're going to love this. A lot of people have been asking me about private coaching. I'm working with a select few number of people that are ready to make a change in their life, not thinking about it, but actually ready. If you fall into that category, go to workhardplayhardcoaching.com. All right, please enjoy this conversation with Pavel Stuchlik. Pavel, welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much.
You know what? I am so excited. This is going to be one of those shows where we're going to just pray to the podcast gods that everything is going to work out okay. You are just off of a flight from Denver into Atlanta, which ironically is the city that I live in and you used to live in. And we are packing for a move to go to Europe and get on a plane ourselves. So it's one of those things, but I wanted to make sure that we found the time to connect with each other. So thank you for doing this in your crazy busy schedule.
I am so grateful to be here.
Okay, so the show is basically going to have three parts. The first is we're going to talk about the science of achievement, which is how you're able to do the things that you've been able to do. And we're going to dig into what those details are. And then we're going to talk about the art of fulfillment, which you are a master of, which is taking the time in your life to really live not just a productive life from a capitalistic standpoint, let's say, but also one from a fulfillment perspective as well. So I'm super excited, and then we'll wrap up with some rapid fire questions. Cool?
Let's do it.
All right. So I think a great starting off point would be to take you back to the former Czechoslovakia. Can you explain to people what growing up there was like, and maybe give a few examples of anything that stands out for you as far as what your day-to-day life was like there?
Absolutely. No, so I was born on a border with Germany and Czech Republic. So literally 50 minutes to Germany, and then, 50 minutes to Poland. So it's like that Y. So if you see Czech Republic, it's all the way up north on the top. I was born in the middle of mountains. City had about 50,000 people, quite tiny. And I'm going to give you the look from my wife's point of view when she went first time, because she thought she could not believe where I came from and how behind it was, and how, some of the houses are still very gray. It's all changing now, and colors after communist era are coming in. But, it's not Prague. Prague is an amazing, beautiful town. But where I'm from, it's off the chain. You're in the middle of nowhere.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? We don't think about communist countries, per se as actually being gray. We just look at them from what we see on television, certainly from an American or, North American standpoint, and we see these buildings that look, sort of like very industrial. But you make a point that's really interesting to me, and that is the fact that they didn't use color. Why do you think that is? Is it because color had, just sort of like went against communism?
It's very interesting. I think, and I don't know this fact, but I believe because everything was owned by the government, they kept everything, same or every place you went to was owned by the government. There was nothing, privately owned until the 90s, until 91. And so basically, I believe that that's the reason why. And I will give you one more funny fact. My wife is from Alabama, and so she compares Czech Republic to Alabama, that it's the redneck country of Europe.
That is actually really funny, because I think what she's doing is she's sort of like drawing the parallel. No knock to listeners in Alabama, but I'm assuming she's drawing the parallel of sort of like, let's say not the most cosmopolitan place in the world. So that is really, really interesting. All right, I want to move on a little bit to music and sports, because you had a passion for music and sports pretty early on. In fact, since you were 12. You were excited about both of them. And I want to dig into the music part a little bit later in the show. But first, I want to talk about cycling. As you do with most things that you do, you went all in and you became a professional cyclist. Can you perhaps set the scene of how you went about starting a business to fund your cycling with selling carbon fiber bicycle parts?
Absolutely. So it's so funny. That same drive came in a very similar time, and there was a point of my life where I had to decide. And my dad really gave me the decision: you're either going to go to school, your life is paid for, or you're going to have to figure out a way how to start making money. And so during that time, I was 17 years old when I started trading carbon parts between Alibaba and eBay. And that's now a little over 10 years ago, where Alibaba wasn't as accepted as it is today, especially on the US market. And I figured out a way to basically list something on eBay, but ship it directly from Chinese factories to US consumer within the timeline that it was still acceptable, and never had to have any startup money. So that was kind of my first, big start. As far as cycling goes, I just had this vision and drive, and it was such a hard sport. And up until today, I say that's what made me never stop, because picking 7 hours a day on a bike ride or doing a business meetings, it's so much easier physically, So I put all that drive into that. Also with cycling and music, I basically had to stop music at about 15 years old because I couldn't do day and night. And so that was my kind of like a pivotal, direction. And I really started like hardcore cycling when I was about 15, 16, going back to Czech, racing for the national team and coming back, to US later on.
It's really interesting because you were able to, growing up in sort of a communistic environment, you did not have the best entrepreneurial role models of, how to sort of be capitalistic and entrepreneurial, but yet you still had that drive that was inside of you. Where do you think that, I guess drive is probably a good word, but more than that, it's like, I guess maybe the know-how, like how did you even put together how to find Alibaba, list it on eBay, ship it from China, all without using your own money, because you weren't in an environment that sort of taught you how to do that.
Well, yes and no. So my parents actually, right after the communist era, they started business right away. And so they converted at first my grandmother's house on a ski resort into a bistro, like a food and drinks and snacks. And so that was like their first business. Then they went into textile because they didn't have enough clothes for us, for me and my brother, because again, the communists, there wasn't much to choose from. The only places you could go to was Germany or Turkey, the surrounding countries that were known for good clothes. And really where it started is filling the need. For me, in the cycling industry, it is so expensive to buy these carbon bikes. And I was like, what the heck? There must be another way to this. So I started searching, and then I found out the suppliers. I found out the actual factories that make it. And when I saw the prices, $4,000 frame for $500, I was like, no freaking way. And so at that point, I knew I got to help my fellow riders, because we were riding 1990 old school, nasty bikes in 2000s. And so basically that's where it started. I wanted to provide my friends and surrounding areas with high-end bikes that were at cost of what they would have.
It's interesting. When you see communism now, how do you feel about it? In other words, when you see, countries like Cuba or North Korea or, Russia not that long ago, do you connect to what the people are going through there, or were you just too young to really sort of like understand what your parents were up against?
Definitely too young. But throughout my business career, I found the closest thing to it, which is self-management and holacracy. And so I'm actually very well, I guess, educated in that field. And I'm a big supporter in bringing equality into people's hands. But I am also not supporter when it gets, too controlling. When it, because basic foundation of communism is actually very enlightened way of living, because you don't have, poverty in a sense, right? But when the governments took it as a form of power and control, that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where on paper it's great, but in actuality, it's never what you think it is, or it certainly doesn't manifest in that way. And in some ways, the human drive and spirit is muted. And, people just don't have that entrepreneurial spirit to continue. So I see what you're saying. You made the decision to leave cycling and become more of an entrepreneur. And you were into all sorts of things, from cooking shows to flipping houses in Germany and Czech. And, most people are paralyzed with fear when it comes to stepping into new businesses. Do you have any tips or best practices for people that find themselves scared to take a leap?
Absolutely. I mean, at that point, some friends were making fun of me that anything that's being sold, I could sell. And I even used to have a website called pavelsvision.com. And I had anything from Asian trading to, carbon bikes to real estate to rental vacation houses. And it was just a period where I had to figure out something and I had to get it funded, right? But whatever people are, I think, the biggest things that I've learned from this is what are the thoughts? What do you want to do? What is the why? What is the driving force? I'm sure you know Simon Sinek. I actually resonate with why, what, how quite greatly. And I've used it in every single company that I have started. But, knowing your why, what's your intention first? Because it always has to be greater than yourself. When things are greater than yourself, now there is this bigger, higher power driving the force behind you. And it's no longer about the me, but it becomes about the we. And I'm all about we consciousness. How can we make the world a better place? And whatever's through business, whatever's through spirituality and music, it doesn't matter. There's higher force that, is above this. And we are most of the time, kind of playing against it versus letting it play for us. So for me, it's what is my why? Why am I going to do this? What is going to be the steps, right? Like, how am I going to achieve it? Create a, dream goal, create a year plan, month, week, day. I always like to break everything down into small segments. So that way it's not just, this big dream goal where most people fail because the minute it gets hard, the minute they have to get a payroll, the minute they have to get funding, most people quit, right? So really it's the consistency, staying with the why, because that will keep on recharging your mission, recharging your motivation in the first place, and then educate yourself. Every piece of it. When I start something, I want to know everything about it. What are the podcasts? What are the books? What are the successful people? And imitate their success and find your own ways to it.
So the why, Simon Sinek, he wrote a book, as you mentioned, called Start With Why. And he's a great keynote speaker. He travels all around the world talking about this. And it's always been interesting to me because, look, Simon's a super intelligent guy. There's no question about it. But, his concept of starting with why, on one hand could be so simplistic. And on the other hand, it's why is it that we don't look at that? Most people will, sort of like spend all this time on reverse engineering what their business is going to look like and how they need to do it and everything associated with it. But they spend very, very little time thinking about why they're actually doing it. And it's a great question to ask somebody, why are you doing it? And you can listen to them fumble. So I love when things are so different in how entrepreneurs think, because you don't take that approach. You really do start with why. And I love that. You left Europe and you bought some Orange Theory franchises. Can you walk me through why you decided to leave Europe and move into the Orange Theory franchise space?
Absolutely. So my first business venture in US on a US soil started with actually a sushi restaurant in Boulder, Colorado. It's something that we did in congruence with my family because we had to have a visa. And prior to that, I was in real estate, but the real estate didn't count. It didn't have enough, active employees, didn't have enough of all the criteria that the US government, asked for. And so my first actually thing was this sushi restaurant. Afterwards, it didn't qualify again. So I actually moved to Hawaii, opened up series of frozen yogurt franchises. I don't know if you remember the frozen yogurt era or boom. And then
that was your Tutti Frutti world, right?
You got it. That was Tutti Frutti world. And then I actually found Orange Theory. The reason why I went into Orange Theory is because the real estate and the frozen yogurt started going down. The cap rates were, worse and worse and started, recuperating. And also, I had another pivotal moment of my life. I wasn't fulfilling my why. I was fulfilling financial needs, but I was not fulfilling my heart. And I was unhappy, unsatisfied. I was making people fat. And up until today, I tell you, I don't like the way I used to negotiate, because to negotiate means I have to win over someone. And so I've been through series of search until basically we found Orange Theory, where it's such a highly, evolved mission. If you think about it, healing people, giving them more life. Imagine the obesity, right, alone in America or the world. And so for me, it was, win-win. When we found it, there was, very few stores, and they gave me 2 days. We drove with my wife to Florida. It was about 2 days before the yearly closeout, when the FDD, the franchise disclosure documents, have to be reestablished for next year. And Orange Theory Corporate was going to keep Georgia. And Georgia, I've never been here. Atlanta, knew very little, only from cycling, because I did race, in the Blood Mountains when I was 15, 16 years old. But in 2 days, we were able to get everything done, show them the plan. They had this 23-year-old kid that was there with, already good business background, but, didn't know me, didn't think we would do it. Next day, after we got this sign, moved to Georgia or Atlanta, started it. Within 6 months, we had the fastest growing market in the entire chain. And at that point, we just, the rest is history. We went into Oregon, Nevada, San Francisco, parts of New York, South Beach, Hawaii, and we built it into a very large business portfolio.
So you were able to use the money from one to bankroll it into the next and into the next and into the next. Did it ever become a point for you where there were too many Orange Theories to manage? And do you still currently own them, or have you gotten rid of all of them at this point?
Great question. It was actually about 3 years ago when one of the hardest part of my life started. At the peak, we had almost 500 people in the link. I brought in close to 100 franchisees, and there was a time where I literally didn't have the manpower, running low on funds, and it was very challenging, very difficult. Just to remind you, when we started this, I didn't know how to file, payroll. I didn't know how to start a business license. All of that was fresh while we were running the hottest fitness franchise in the world.
It's really, really interesting. So where are you now with Orange Theory? Do you own any, or is it all gone?
So I still own Hawaii and Florida, South Beach location, and we're actually in process of selling that as well.
So so ultimately you're going to get out of the Orange Theory business on those two final locations. If it was in alignment with your mission and it was producing revenue, why would you get rid of the last two?
Honestly, it has been great. I just moved on. So about 3 years ago, I went for the first time to this Darkroom Retreat. And I spent 10 days in complete darkness with no food, no light, literally just me reflecting, no cell phone. And I got out of there and I was like, I really, touched myself for the first time. It was about day 7 when I completely broke into tears like I never have before. For hours and hours, I was bawling and crying. And the reason why I was in bliss, it was pure bliss. For the first time in my life, I didn't have expectations for the future. I didn't care what happened in the past. All my guilt, all my fears, gone. And when I walked out of there, I basically decided I love business. It's fun, but I'm going to let this to other people that's their mission. And I want to move into the space of motivation, keynote speaking, music industry, and creating experiences so people can also touch their higher self, their best self. And that's where I'm now.
It's really interesting. Let's get a bit more current. When you and I met, you were having a few business exits and you were picking back up the music career that you left behind when you were much younger in the form of DJing. Your stage name is Noah Aon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Can you tell us why you chose that name?
You got it. So it's Noah Aon.
Aon.
Yeah, you got it. Noah means movement, and Aeon is all or none. It's also reflects a duality. So it's like a self-reflection. And it's really what happened to me. And my whole mission with that is to unify people and to go back to the center. So the thing that splits it in the logo, that's the harmony. And I believe people need more harmony, joy, happiness in life, and especially in this world of fast pace. And that's the whole mission behind it.
When we talk about DJing, when I say you're a DJ, for people that are listening, it gets confusing because there's all kinds of DJs, right? You are not a wedding DJ. You have an album and you're doing massive events like headlining in the best clubs around the world and playing Burning Man and giant festivals. Most DJs are struggling to book a gig. If you had to narrow down 2 to 3 key ingredients that allowed this meteoric growth that you've had so quickly, what would they be?
Well, it would again be why. So my why was completely different than just going into music space and compete with other DJs. My why was to unify people using the sound and what I call modern healing. I use a lot 432 hertz, the frequency of love. And what happens with it is, I was different. My whole thing was about intentional movement, dance parties. That's why I have the hashtag Noah movement. It's all about using music as almost like an alchemy, where people are taken on a journey. People are taken on a journey through almost meditation, just in a movement settings, because more and more people know and seek meditation, but there's many forms to meditate. It doesn't just have to be in complete stillness, silence. And so for me, and also the tip for others, is that, again, what's your brand? What's your why? And how are you going to differentiate with it? Because when you are fueled by your heart and you're guided by your heart, not by your mind, what you think you should have, not being in a place where, this guy does this, let me copy and paste that, right? It's not you. It's just imitating somebody else other than you. And so, again, finding that deep purpose behind it, and then it moves people.
Well, what's interesting is the theme that keeps coming up that I'm hearing is that you keep coming back to your why, perhaps maybe when you get lost or you're trying to figure out what's next or you're trying to dive back into your passion. Your why is the question that you ask yourself over and over again is, why am I doing this? And then the inspiration seems to spark from the answer to that question. You mentioned 2 things, one a minute ago and one a while ago. And the first one is 432 hertz. For people that are listening, music, you can sort of like explain this better than me, but my understanding of what you mean by that is that there's a frequency that music has, and that frequency of hertz, which is just a measurement of sound, that tone is in alignment with a love frequency. And I know that different frequencies evoke different emotions. Can you talk about, explain a little bit better than I just did, and maybe tell me what are some other frequencies that people can sort of use in their everyday life?
Absolutely. So, you've done a great job as far as the frequency goes, but there is series and series of different frequencies. There is a gentleman, his name is Asa, that we're actually working on an amazing podcast as well as a compilation together. And what we're doing, he specializes, he's basically the one that brought the frequency into the surface, but he's mostly in the meditation and healing space. It's called source vibrations. And so, for example, he uses like consciousness expansion, that's 741. There's a relationship harmonization, 639. And I don't want to go into depth. There's a variety of frequencies that listeners can search, and they can also find him on Spotify. But what it does, it's this underlying, almost like a subconscious, effect. And, you've probably heard of binaural beats. You've probably heard of, musical healing, where people are taken with diseases into a sound chambers. And so sound is coming more and more to the surface as not just something you can hear a great vocal, but also what is the underlying frequency, right? And so The frequency for me is everything, because if you look at back, even in the Bible, right, at the beginning there was a word, right? So that's sound. That's a frequency that we vibrate or resonate with. Same goes for universe. And I don't want to go into too much, I guess scientific part, but more and more science is catching up as to what sound can do for us.
It's interesting. There's an app. I don't know if you ever heard of the app. It's called the Insight Timer. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's a great app. You'd love it. It's called Insight Timer. Insight, one word, timer. And basically what it is it gives you, it's a free app that gives people can put the meditations that they've created up onto the app, and then it becomes crowdsourced where the one who has the highest meditation goes up at the top, and they do the same for music, and they do the same for these binaural beats and these sounds that you're referring to. And what's cool about it is that you can just see the ones that people have responded to the most. So when I messed around with the app and I listened to different things, and I went through these frequencies, I noticed that some of the frequencies I listened to, I was really turned off by, and others I did not want to end. And I thought maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. So my teacher, her name is Jasmine. She's the one that I go to the Darkroom every year. She has the same thing. We're programmed to hear different frequencies, and if we're not ready, I guess, to hear something, it won't vibe with us. It's almost like you have to turn it off right away. Did you have that same feeling?
Yeah. I mean, some of them I listen to, and they are just amazing. Like if you're sitting there and you're writing or journaling or meditating and you just listen to the frequency, when you get the right one, you feel like you're floating on a cloud. I mean, it's the most amazing thing in the world. But if you get one for whatever reason, or at least that was the case for me, if we got one that just didn't feel right, you just you did not want to be in it. You just want to turn it off. So I was always confused about this, because I know that certain frequencies are for love and certain frequencies are for healing and certain, all these different things. But I was really struggling because some of them I liked and some of them I didn't like so much. So I was just wondering if you had any experience with that.
Well, so the way I learned it is that we are like a keynote, right? And listening to a certain keynote, you either resonate with it or you don't, right? Now, if potentially, let's say that you have a little closed heart and then you're listening to frequency of love, it could be, you may not, perceive it right. It may be very, dirty or negative sound for you, but then you can maybe turn it on later on when you're in a place of gratitude and more stillness, and all of a sudden you open up to it more. That's I really wish my friend Asa was here, because he's like a master in explaining this. But maybe what we'll do is we'll do a podcast with your friends so we can kind of dig into this, because I have been getting asked this question more and more. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time with it to see if something hit you. But I want to ask you about your energy. You have an infectious energy. You have an incredible belief in yourself, and you seem to me to be so deeply happy all the time. I know that the book, The Power of Now, was a critical book for you. What are some of the lessons that you took from the book that you use in your life today? Well, so it's a combination. So first of all, I grew up with shaman. So I've always been open to energies and different spiritual, traditional, you name it, learnings and studies. I'll give you a quick example. I was listening to or reading Power of Now when I was at high school in US, and I was actually taking to the principal because I didn't like algebra. And so instead of algebra, I would do self-studies on what, really interested me. By the way, I paid a friend to finish online high school for me. So I have no college, no school. My school is life and what really interests me. And I've always spent time, every 3 months, I go do something crazy to grow myself. But the most impactful things in my life have been my belief system, because most people believe they have to have a certain things in order for them to do a certain things, and then they never become them, right? It's the have, do, be paradigm. And what I've learned is when you live by the opposite, when you are it, you be, you do the right things, the right steps to meet the right people, and then you have the right results as a almost resolution, right? For me, let's say that you say law of attraction, right? It's sequenced with thoughts. What are the thoughts that you have about everything, everyone in your space? Because then you take the actions according to that, and then you have the results, right? So be, do, have has been one of my biggest values in life, is to embrace who you want to be so you can call it into space, whatever's friends, studies, teachings, so you have all the results because of all the things you already are. And so I spent at least 2-3 years rewriting negative situations in my life, whatever it was with friends, in business career, anything that caused me any sorts of emotional, pain. I would write it down and rewrite it, recode it almost. I'm a huge believer that we are, our mind is like a center and our body is like a computer. So kind of like a software and hardware, right? We come to this earth with a certain amount of hardware, and it's up to us how much we upgrade it, what apps do we download into it. And I'm just using that example because it's a great, I think, analogy, because everybody knows that when you press something in your computer, it reacts, right? It does the task that you ask it to do. And same way, your body and emotions respond, because that's what makes your life feel, real. That's why we have our mental body, our physical body, and our emotional body to basically, deal with. And so I take them all equally as important. I train them and I fulfill them equally as much, because then you can have a balanced, harmonious life.
It's really interesting. So you went about identifying all the significant events that you can remember in your life and rewrote the story to interrupt the pattern and rewire the software in your brain so that you see it differently.
You exactly got it. Because when somebody is having hardships in their life, most people focus on the things that are easy first, so then life becomes hard, a lot of times. B, when you focus on the things that are hard, where the lessons lie, then your life can become easy. C, when you don't see things as a hardship in the first place, but you just see it as the next level up, kind of like in a video game, and see it and welcome every challenge, because now there's something for you to learn, and sooner you can learn, sooner you can move on, and then I experience this lightness. I don't have these painful fear. I'm not living in past. I'm not living in the future, because I know where I am, who I want to be. Everything else follows. Everything else comes to you.
Amazing. What I'd like to do is move on to the art of fulfillment portion of the show and talk about some of the things that you're doing to improve life outside of business for you. And you've touched on so many of them because it's part of your DNA now. It's just who you are. But I want to start this section off with, what is a struggle that you're currently dealing with?
Yeah, very good. The last 2 years, I've actually spent quite a struggle because of this new change. I have basically decided, consciously, that I want to move into my highest potential, and I literally called it into the space where everything in my life has been challenged, every relationship, everything, and I call it the level up. Right? The art of fulfilling, that if you want to be at your best, living your best, you're going to have to change all the patterns that you've lived with, right? So let's say that you have had a pattern that you're not enough in a certain situation, or let's say you had a pattern that after success, you have to fail, right? I had to move through every single one of these to basically go into almost like a dark hole, because after the dark room, I decided that I want to completely change my life. I mean, I literally walked out of there and I decided to leave my business mask, off, or taking it off, and move into a completely new paradigm, something that nobody knew me for, right? And so the last 2 years, I've been going through a lot of hard transformation, myself. Whatever it's financially, because I left the business as they were, whatever it is in relationship, because I've changed every, structure of my core. But at the same time, I am, at my highest potential. I'm in service to people, and I feel so greatly, poured with gratitude because I get to touch so many humans now every day.
It's interesting. Part of that process that I was sort of a part of, just because we lived in the same building together, you left Atlanta and you decided to move to Denver. Was that sort of part of the change that you were after?
Also, so it was actually Boulder, Colorado, and we're
okay. Okay. So you fly into Denver, but then you drive to Boulder. Is that it, or you fly into Boulder?
I fly into Denver and then go to Boulder.
Okay, got it.
And really, honestly, the biggest reason why we went there was I have 2 kids, and so the quality of lifestyle for them is just so much greater than being in the heart of the city. And also, I decided that wherever I go next, it's going to be my resting place instead of active place. So it's been very good for that, because anytime I'm back home, I'm there to either be for the family or for my next creation forward.
When you say your resting place, is that sort of how you describe Boulder now, as more of a resting place for you, or you mean the next place you want to go to is resting?
No, that's my resting place.
That's your resting place. So you're enjoying it, and how is your family enjoying it?
I think we're all great. We did like I was saying, we're going through a lot of reinstruction of businesses right now, so it's been very impactful for all of us. But I think we're literally at the end of the J curve. I'm a huge fan. I don't know if you've probably heard of J curve, especially from the multi-level marketing. But we decided to change our lives. We dropped all the way down, and now we're kind of cleaning up to what's the next decade going to be like.
You mentioned that you have 2 children, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because some of the listeners of the show have children themselves, and they struggle with doing things that are outside of the confines of the box that they sort of created for themselves. And you're probably the extreme example that I know of somebody who just frankly doesn't give a shit, and you're going to do what you want to do if you feel called to do it. I mean, you really are somebody who acts on it. In what ways do you raise your children differently than most parents, at least from your viewpoint anyway?
No, great. And just so you know, for every listener, it's far the greatest challenge for my life is to balance the family with myself and with career or the mission. And it's always so tough, because you want to give time to everybody, but it's not always possible. So clear time management has been just so important in this. But what I do with kids is I teach them spirituality. I teach them stars. I teach them meditation. I teach them self-love, self-confidence. My little daughter, she's now 5. She goes and takes ice baths with us. And my biggest thing with them is I ask them, would you like to do this? And if they say yes, then I follow it. One thing I've learned from Waldorf, where they went, is that kids up to, I believe, age of 7, they need to. You don't want them to decide with multiple choices, because if you give them 5, 6 choices, it makes them they're not capable of taking that yet. And so what I now do is it's option A or option B. So you give them 2 choices, and then it's been this very like free flow, kind of like letting them do whatever they say within. Almost like an inflatable balloon. When you inflate a balloon, let them push it however far they like, but have the perimeters around it.
That's interesting. What is the Waldorf? Is that a school that your children are in Boulder?
Yeah, you got it. So Waldorf is like a alternative, school where they are, taught mostly by art, by experiences. Everything in school is experimental. They don't do screens. They don't play with plastic toys. It's kind of like Montessori, just a little different.
It's really interesting. Listen, I can't get myself in an ice bath, so I don't know how I'm going to get my my 4-year-old in one. So I'm gonna have to have you call your friend Wim Hof and see if you can get me into one of those things. Right now, I just like a hot shower.
Well,
but God's not done. I was going to say God's not done with me yet.
That's hilarious.
Are there any positions or opinions in the last few years, or it could be way back, it doesn't have to be in the last few years, that you've changed substantially where you've shifted your position or completely changed your mind? Maybe you were like, I know that this is the way it is. And then all of a sudden recently you're like, you know what? I was wrong. I don't believe that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a business sense, big time. And that's even in life, I have a hard time seeing the current economy, like the way it's structured and the way how we live, how so many people, live in this poverty in general. And I can see how there's very hard way out, right? So one of the main things that I'm really fan of, I think it's Finland, who's trying to do like a minimum payment amount per month. And what that is that they are paying like $1,000 to everybody, so they can have money for their basic needs, and then they can do whatever they like to do. And the lesson or the change for me is that I used to pay certain salaries and not thinking how it actually affects them. And what I've learned is that people can't perform at their best if their if their bases are not covered. And so that's been in the last 3-4 years my biggest challenge between staying profitable but yet fulfilling people's needs.
That's really interesting. What's the one goal that you thought when you achieved it, everything is going to be better? And then you achieved it and you're like, it really didn't give me what I thought it was going to give me.
It's I could tell you one was cycling in a sports. So when I achieved, all that I ever wanted, I was like, so what? For what? And I've learned that, sport is basically a modern gladiatorship where people are watching you basically almost die, and more spicy it gets, better it is. And so that's one. Same thing went in business. I start making great money. But again, for what? If my brothers and sisters around me are still unhappy, unfulfilled, and can't have food to eat, how am I a greater person with that? And so, those were some of my biggest pivotal moments in life, is realizing that if we all not winning, nobody's winning.
I love that. If you could spend 1 month anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
I am really intrigued by Asian countries. And so I think traveling through Asia would be, very lucrative. I know you said one country, so I'll pick Mongolia. It's the least populated country in the world. And it just freaking... It's mind-boggling for me how different people live, what are their values, and that's actually, by the way, one of my most favorite things about traveling is just observing how people live, how people react, what is their driver for happiness, because those are all programs, right? Programs from their society, programs from their history, programs from their parents, and so I'm just like a fly. I want to be fly on the wall and spend months traveling through the monasteries there.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know what you'd like? There's if you haven't seen it already, there's a Netflix special called Street Food. And don't let the title fool you. What they'll do, and they did a piece in Mongolia, which is what made me think of it. What they'll do is they'll go do a deep dive on the person, the history and the background of the person that's selling the street food. And I think you'll really, really love it, because it's exactly what you just described. And you're right. I mean, that's why we travel, right? That's why we do what we do. If you can go to only one restaurant before you die, where would your last meal be?
Hey, that's a hard one. I'll say it would be something with soups.
Something with soups, huh? You're a soup guy.
Yeah, I love where you can cook your own soups. Whatever it's like shabu shabu from any Japanese. But I love just boiling food in soups.
That's really interesting. All right, so we're going to move into the last portion of the show, which is the rapid fire round. Answer as quickly or as slowly as you like. It's a first thing that pops into your mind round. What would your friends say is one of your superpowers?
taking people and changing the energy in them.
What's one of the things you're afraid of right now?
Afraid of rejection.
What keeps you up at night?
The best future for my kids.
What do people never ask you, but you wish they did?
What's my why?
What's the one thing that you want to get better at?
I want to get better at balancing my personal life with my family life and with a business.
What book, other than The Power of Now, have you reread the most?
The Book of Truth from Pavel Stuchlik.
It's a new one. Haven't heard that one. Okay. What's your guilty pleasure?
Ice cream.
All right. And then the last question, we're going to change things up a little bit. What one question would you like to ask me?
I would like to ask you, what is your why?
Well, my why is what I'm doing right now, which is I'm on a mission to wake people up to their life, not entirely dissimilar from what you're doing right now. And I'm running a mastermind. I do 3 events a year. One in they're all in different locations, but this year it's Boston, Monaco, and then Italy. And basically, what we do is we put people that absolutely love what it is that they do. They're in many ways addicted to it because they love it. And what really winds up happening is that they spend their lives banging their head away in front of their iPhone and their laptop and working, and they're listening to more podcasts and they're going to more seminars and listening to more keynotes. But they're doing it all under the guise of, yeah, but I love what I do. And it's, I don't see it as work. But there's a whole world that's out there. And it's all of the things that you've, discussed, the different cultures that you want to see and the different experiences, like you did in Thailand, where you didn't come out and see daylight for 10 days, and the ice baths and all of those things that you're doing that are waking you up to your life. People who are in love with what they do and passionate about what they do, they largely ignore those areas of life. So I just decided to create it for them. So as an example, in Monaco, I'll have some helicopters that are going to meet them in Nice and fly them into Monaco. And the next day, We're going to wake up and we're going to go on a vintage car ride through the French Riviera, and then do a little goal-setting session in a castle overlooking the Mediterranean. And the next day, we're going to get some speedboats and go into Saint-Tropez for the day and party. And then we're going to wrap it up. In Italy, we're going to go truffle hunting. And so the idea, and then go back to a villa and cook the truffles. And the idea of this is to take these entrepreneurs that are not going to step away from work. They're just going to keep doing the work, and just force them every, or maybe gently motivate them every 100 days or so, and just get them out of their box so that they can come back more refreshed. So my why is to be able to stimulate these areas. The Italians have La Dolce Vita, the French have Joie de Vivre. We have happy hour. We just don't have it. And so I want to be the guy that, kind of like to your last comment of, balancing work and family and business. I want to be the guy that can sort of like chunk it up into work hard, play hard, and wake them up to their life. You get one life.
I like it a lot. That's amazing.
Right, well,
I actually want to come.
Well, you are more than welcome. You are more than welcome. I'll send you a link for the Italy one, and maybe you and your wife would like to join us for the next one. It'll be in Florence in October. Beautiful. So I'll send you all the info, and thank you so much. Do you have any final words, suggestions, or an ask for the people that are listening?
No, so basically, if anybody's interested, my biggest core kind of offering right now is, the musical scene. So I have music on Spotify, SoundCloud, everywhere. The second offering is I do workshops, I do retreats, and I call them System Reset, using the most efficient techniques I've learned from people around the world. And all of that is, either found in Facebook or Instagram, and it's at Noah, NOAAON official. And please write me if you have any comments. We'd love to connect.
This has been awesome. I really appreciate you doing this. I know that you're about ready to start one of your retreats this weekend. That's why you're in Atlanta, and that's why we had all that, city background noise. But you literally got off the plane, grabbed your bags, went into a cafe so that you can accommodate my schedule because I have movers here today, and we're moving just like you did, out of the building, right? And today is our day. So I am so grateful that this was able to happen. I know it was a long time coming and our schedules just did not line up. So I wish you nothing but success on everything that you're doing. You are a beautiful and very special soul. And every time I get a chance to talk with you, I learn something new. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Rob, as well. All the best.
All right. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode and you know someone that needs some help in either stepping up their work hard game or their play hard game, it would mean the world to me if you shared this podcast with them to help me get this movement out there. So if you like what you heard, head on over to iTunes, take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review, and I will be forever grateful. So until the next episode, excuses are over. It's time to live.